70 million years ago, the Arctic Circle was not the frozen wasteland we know today. Instead of glaciers and polar bears, picture dense forests of conifers, ferns, and swamps, all sitting under a bizarre cycle of 24-hour daylight in summer and nearly 4 months of complete darkness in winter. Imagine camping there. One season you never need a flashlight, and the next season you can't find your own hands. Now, here's the kicker. Dinosaurs didn't just pass through this strange land. They actually lived there year-round. Yes, real dinosaurs in the Arctic. And no, they didn't wear little dinosaur sweaters, although some of them probably had feathers thick enough to qualify. Back in 1961, along Alaska's Colville River, paleontologist Robert Liscombe stumbled upon bones he thought belonged to mammals. It took over 20 years for scientists to realize those bones were actually dinosaur fossils. That discovery was a game-changer. Suddenly, the old textbook-line dinosaurs lived only in warm, tropical swamps, looked as outdated as a flip phone. By the 2010s, more digs revealed nests, eggs, and even juvenile tracks. That meant dinosaurs weren't just seasonal tourists migrating south for the winter. They were permanent Arctic residents. Think about that. Babies were hatching in a place that would be pitch black for months at a time. If you're a baby dinosaur, that's basically being born straight into a horror movie. Let's start with one of my favorites, Troodon. Imagine a dinosaur about 8 feet long, 3 feet tall at the hip, and weighing less than a teenage human. Troodon was fast, agile, and had enormous eyes spaced wide apart, perfect for seeing in the dark. If night vision goggles had a dinosaur mascot, Troodon would be on the box. It also had one of the largest brain-to-body ratios of any dinosaur, suggesting it was, well, let's just say dinosaur smart. That's not exactly Harvard smart, but compared to its peers, Troodon was probably the one pulling off clever ambushes, while the others were still figuring out how not to trip over tree roots. Next, Dromaeosaurus albertensis, a cousin of the velociraptor. At only about 6 feet long and 30 pounds, this wasn't the type of predator that gave you Jurassic Park nightmares, but don't underestimate it. Covered in feathers for insulation and armed with sickle-shaped claws on its feet, Dromaeosaurus was the Arctic's stealth assassin. They likely hunted small mammals and reptiles, and when they couldn't find those, they scavenged leftovers because, hey, even a cold-blooded killer needs a snack. And then we get to the heavyweight champion of the Arctic, Nanuqsaurus hoglundi. Think of it as the fun-sized version of Tyrannosaurus rex. It was about half the size, 20 feet long, maybe a ton in weight. That might sound disappointing until you realize that in the Arctic, smaller was actually smarter. Food was scarce, and being lighter meant Nanuqsaurus could survive on fewer calories. Imagine a T-Rex that downsized to a Prius for better mileage. Scientists believe Nanuqsaurus had dense feathers, maybe even white in winter, which would have made it the original polar bear lizard. And while Troodon relied on sharp eyesight, Nanuqsaurus relied on its nose. Studies of its skull show huge olfactory bulbs, basically giving it a sense of smell so powerful. It could probably sniff out a frozen burrito 3 miles away. Of course, predators don't get all the attention. The Arctic also had some truly impressive herbivores. Picture Ugrunaaluk cookbacensis, a hadrosaur or duck-billed dinosaur. These were 30 feet long, lived in herds, and ate plants by the ton. Their jaws held hundreds of tiny teeth in battery-like rows, perfect for grinding ferns and conifers into prehistoric salad. Then there was Pachyrhinosaurus paritorum, a ceratopsian with a giant bony lump on its nose instead of a sharp horn. At 20 feet long and weighing around for tons, they were the armored tanks of the Arctic. When a pack of Nanuqsaurus showed up, Pachyrhinosaurus had safety in numbers. Picture a herd of armored cows glaring at you. That's enough to make even a T-Rex think twice. And don't forget the smaller, quirky residents like Alaskacephalae gonglafi, the dome-headed dinosaur. It was the size of a big dog with a skull, built like a bowling ball. Males may have rammed heads in courtship battles, basically inventing dinosaur sumo before sumo existed. Finally, the ostrich meyx, like Ornithomimus. Long legs, beaked mouths, covered in feathers, they could sprint across the landscape at highway speeds. These guys were probably omnivores, nibbling on plants and occasionally grabbing a lizard. They were the grab-whatevers on the buffet type. So, how did they all survive? The Arctic Cretaceous wasn't icy like today, but winters still dipped close to freezing, and for months of night meant no photosynthesis. Plants stopped growing, rivers froze, and food chains collapsed. Survival strategies were everything: herding, scavenging, feathers for insulation. Smaller body sizes, even partial hibernation. And that's the beauty of this story. The Arctic wasn't just survivable, it was a crucible for adaptation. Dinosaurs didn't just endure the polar night, they thrived in it. Now, before you think Arctic dinosaurs had it tougher than anyone else, let's zoom out. Because while the North Pole had its scrappy survivors, other corners of the world were showing off some of the biggest and baddest dinosaurs ever to walk the Earth. And yes, size does matter, at least if you're a 70-ton plant eater. First up, the sauropods, the skyscrapers of the dinosaur world. Brachiosaurus, with its giraffe-like neck, stretched 70 feet long and could stand 40 feet tall. That's taller than a 4-story building. Scientists estimate it weighed as much as 10 elephants stacked together, although, to be fair, no one has ever actually tried stacking elephants. But even Brachiosaurus was a lightweight compared to Patagodoton majorum and Argentinosaurus in South America. Argentinosaurus may have reached 120 feet in length and tipped the scales at nearly 100 tons. To put that in perspective, if you parked two Boeing 737s next to each other, that's about the same weight. Try fitting that through airport security. These gentle giants weren't Arctic residents, they lived in warmer climates, but their existence shows the range of dinosaur adaptability. From giants basking in the sun to smaller, feathered hunters navigating months of darkness, dinosaurs conquered every niche available to them. Of course, no dinosaur documentary is complete without the celebrity carnivores. Let's start with the king himself, Tyrannosaurus rex. At up to 40 feet long and nearly 9 tons, T-Rex had the strongest bite force of any land animal ever, measured about 12,000 pounds of pressure. That's enough to crunch a car door like a potato chip. But T-Rex wasn't alone at the top. Giganotosaurus from South America stretched a bit longer, around 43 feet. Its bite wasn't quite as bone-crushing as T-Rex's, but it could run faster, up to 30 miles per hour. Basically, if the two fought, T-Rex might win in raw power, but Giganotosaurus would win the Dino-Olympic sprint. And then there's Spinosaurus, one of the strangest carnivores ever discovered. Imagine a dinosaur with crocodile jaws, giant claws, and a 6-foot sail on its back. At 50 to 60 feet long and maybe 7 to 9 tons, Spinosaurus was adapted to hunt in rivers, chasing giant fish. If dinosaurs had a Navy SEAL, this was it. Scientists even argue whether it could swim like a crocodile or wade like a stork. Either way, you didn't want to be a fish in its neighborhood. And let's not forget Dinosaurus, the dinosaur with terrible hands. When paleontologists first found only its arms 8 feet long, with claws, they assumed it was a terrifying predator. Later, they discovered the rest of the body, a humpbacked, duck-billed, pot-bellied omnivore. It looked like someone glued random dinosaur parts together as a prank. Still, at 30 feet long and weighing 6 tons, it was not an animal you'd insult to its face. So why talk about all these southern giants when we started in the north? Because they highlight just how unique the Arctic dinosaurs were. Down south, dinosaurs had endless food, mild weather, and plenty of space. Up north, survival was about efficiency, not excess. Nanuqsaurus never reached the size of T-Rex because it simply couldn't afford to. Troodon and Dromaeosaurus relied on intelligence, feathers, and teamwork rather than brute force. Herbivores like Pachyrhinosaurus huddled in herds to endure the long polar night. It's a reminder that evolution does unreward biggest or strongest. It rewards adaptability. In a place where the sun disappeared for months and food vanished with it, only the clever and the cooperative could make it. These discoveries also tell us something important about science itself. For decades, the stereotype was dinosaurs were slow, dumb, cold-blooded reptiles. But the Arctic fossils forced paleontologists to rethink. To live in freezing conditions, many dinosaurs must have been warm-blooded or something close, with feathers acting as insulation. They weren't sluggish lizards, they were dynamic, adaptable creatures, more like birds than we ever imagined. And that's why the story of Arctic dinosaurs isn't just about bones in the ground. It's about challenging assumptions, questioning old models, and realizing nature is far more inventive than our imagination. So next time you picture dinosaurs, don't just think of tropical swamps and roaring T-Rexes. Think of a snowy forest at the top of the world. The sky is black for 4 straight months. The rivers are frozen, and the trees creak in the cold wind. Somewhere in the shadows, Troodon peers out with glowing eyes. In the distance, a Nanuqsaurus stalks through the snow, its feathers bristling in the Arctic night. These weren't just survivors, they were pioneers, proving that life finds a way in even the harshest corners of Earth. And that leaves us with a question. If dinosaurs could thrive in the Arctic darkness 70 million years ago, what else might have been possible? Could there be species we've never even imagined, waiting to be discovered in the fossil record? Because if the Arctic has taught us anything, it's this. Dinosaurs didn't just rule the Earth, they mastered it, from the hottest tropics to the coldest nights.